Well, back to this statement of the National Cabinet on Friday indicated that 30% of the Australian adult population has now had a first dose of a COVID vaccine, including over 50% of over 50-year-olds and over 70% of over 70-year-olds. That's a first dose. They're not strong figures. But the persistent language is about achieving, quote, vaccination thresholds. And there was a bit about, quote, easing restrictions on vaccinated residents, which raises the question, what is the virtue of being vaccinated? There were no timelines on any of this out of National Cabinet, but there was talk about recognising and adopting the existing digital Medicare vaccination certificate. What does that mean? For example, a naturally immune person is a person, I've got one working for me, not vaccinated. He's had the virus and therefore has a fully functioning immune system. He's beaten the virus. Why would he be vaccinated? A vaccine-dependent person doesn't have that protection. Does that person live in a constant fear that a new mutation may render his existing antibodies obsolete? Yet we are giving vaccine passports or vaccine certificates to the vaccinated, the most vulnerable, but not to those who've achieved natural immunity. Dr. Rocco Loiacono has written about this issue of vaccine passports and the fact that Big Brother has taken charge of our lives for too long. It might be time to fight back. But this is another metaphor of how ridiculous everything is. We have the story of Mark Killian, who flew from Los Angeles to Sydney. Remember this, in an attempt to see his 80-year-old father before he died of cancer in Queensland? He couldn't get an exemption. The public flew off the handle, and eventually Queensland Health under Premier Jeanette Young told Mark and his wife they could enter on a $15,000 chartered flight to visit Mark's dad at the Gold Coast University Hospital. The father died last Thursday night, but they weren't allowed to hug or kiss him. What? Would they have given him coronavirus? Or would he have given it to them? Madness reigns. These political leaders you wouldn't feed. I just want to talk about this digital Medicare vaccination certificate. Very important. Let's go to the doctor. Rocco, thank you for your time. Is this a vaccine passport under another name?
Yes. Good evening, Alan. Yes, I mean, the Prime Minister has said in the past that he to the party room that he regretted actually using the term vaccine passports, but it's just a game in semantics. And I was listening to your segment while I was waiting to come on, and one of your viewers actually talked about being untrusting. And when you see what happened to Mark and Anneli Killian, who were fully vaccinated, but what was only after a public outcry that they were actually granted an exemption to see Mark's dying father, I mean, you wonder what the point of all this is. And we talk a lot about protection, and we need to get a certain amount of people vaccinated in order to have protection. But the government, with this kind of terrible behaviour, is actually saying to us, well, we don't actually believe in the figures.
Sorry, Rocco, let me ask you this: are we at the point where we're going to prevent people from going to a restaurant or getting into a plane or going to another state because they haven't been vaccinated? I mean, what about, as I said, if a person has immunity, why would he be vaccinated?
Exactly, and I mean, it's already happening in some states in America. I mean, in New York, for example, they've actually introduced segregation in the stadiums, where if you're unvaccinated, you sit in a certain section of the stadium, and if you're vaccinated, you sit in another section of the stadium. I mean, and this is the kind of thing that these vaccine passports could lead to. I mean, you can't go here, you can't have a job, you can't do this or do that unless you take this medication.
But didn't the World Health Organization, we talk about, the science, the experts, on April 7 state that people should not be required to prove they'd been vaccinated in order to travel overseas? And Dr. Mike Ryan, who heads WHO's Public Health Emergencies program, has said it is vital to record that a person has been vaccinated, but using that information to prohibit a person from taking part in regular life raise complex ethical issues. Where are we going to finish up here?
That's exactly right, Alan. And the reason why the World Health Organization is actually saying that is because there's actually they don't have actually any real evidence that these vaccines are actually preventing transmission. I mean, in Israel, for example, they've had one of the highest vaccination rates, but last week they had an outbreak in the Delta variant. I mean, you mentioned earlier about we're just waiting for the next variant to come along, and guess what? Masks are back, gathering limits are back, and there's already talking about lockdowns. I mean, so why would you want to mandate something when all it could lead to is, again, another lockdown. I mean, what's the point of being vaccinated if we're going to go back into lockdown? What's the point in holding this against people and preventing them from doing things and participating in normal life if it doesn't mean anything?
You quoted Robert Menzies. They all want to go on. Liberal governments about Menzies. Quote, Menzies, we need constantly remind ourselves that democracy can produce tyranny just as readily as any other system of government unless the individual democrat has learnt to attach supreme importance to individual freedom. Rocco, you're doing terrific work. We'll keep you in touch. You make the point. Persuasion's fine. Coercion, we won't cop. Thank you for your time.
Right.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Alan.
Not at all. Dr. Rocco Loiacono from the Faculty of Business and Law at the Curtin Law School at Curtin University. What do you think? Alan at skynews.com.au, 0414 000 848.